Okay, everybody, I hope you had enough to eat. We'll start the program now, and hopefully you can hear me okay. And while we're waiting for everybody to get back to the tables, I'm going to mention just a few things. You've noticed those booklets at each table. What do you think about those? Pretty nice, huh? Yeah. So a lot of hard work went into that, and not me. I'm not taking the credit. Whoops. But a lot of hard work went into that. You'll notice there's some sheets of paper on the table as well where you can add additional information that you'd like to share, and just leave it on the table when you're done. It'll be collected at the end of the day. So that's what those are for. But when you leave, though, there's one booklet for each household. So make sure you take one with you. So if you're a household of 1 or 10, take one with you. There's 95 of them, so there's plenty. So I want to make sure you're aware of that. Also going to mention, when we're all done, we're going to attempt to take some photos up here. One for each family, so Andrew's family, Christine's family, Adina's family, and so on, and then one large group picture. Maybe not necessarily in that order, but that's the goal is when we're done. So please don't run off. I want to have as many as possible for that picture. So next on the list is my dad's going to come forward. He's the one that had the vision and the passion for all this, and he did a lot of work and got the ball rolling, and then others came in, like Tori and Mark, and really helped us out significantly. So he's going to come first and share a little bit, and then we're going to have 2 or 3 others from somebody from each one of the lines, the Carlstrom line, just to speak and share just a little bit about the family and give people an opportunity to say a little bit from the floor. We have a couple portable mics, or one portable mic for that purpose. But and then we'll have a dessert halfway in, and then we'll come back and have the remaining 3 speak. So I want to break it up a little bit because it can get a little overwhelming with this heat. So, and then my dad come forward if he's here, probably out talking somewhere. He is. Here he comes. So, Dad, you're on. So.
Well, welcome. So, thanks for coming today for this is the third major Carlstrom reunion, 1990 and 1987. How many came to those reunions? Awesome. Well, it's up to the young people to take the mantle from this one.
Move to the middle a little bit more, Dad, so you can get you there. You go.
Okay. So, first off, recognition is in order. I want to give thanks to Peter and Sue Moody and their daughter Laurie for an excellent meal. So we'll give them a round of applause. Next, I want to thank the internet. Because without the internet, this could never have happened. We could do the snail mail, but we'd still be getting family trees together. That wouldn't work. Next, I want to thank my granddaughter, Hannah Reed. Where's Hannah? I want to thank Hannah for the computer entry of the data for the family tree and the charts, including the many revisions and updates and numerous questions from her grandfather. I kept hounding her every day when she come home from work. Hannah, did you do that? Did you do this? I'm surprised she still talks to me. Next, I want to give recognition to 2 people. There's one right there, and there's the other one. Tori Britton and her husband, Mark. Tori is Andrew Carlstrom's granddaughter. They contacted me, a couple months or so ago, asking if they could help. When I learned of their experiences and many talents, I immediately thanked my God and then said yes. Because I got to tell you, it wouldn't be what it is. Now, I'm an emotional guy, so bear with me. Okay. For example, they coordinated the arranging and the professional printing of the books. Aren't those great? Name tags, registration cards, posters, photography, sound system, Facebook and YouTube. That's coming. You're going to be able to see all this on Facebook and YouTube, right? Then the many behind-the-scenes volunteers, of which there are many, and I'm not going to begin to give all the names. Yesterday we had a bunch of them here yesterday, just setting up. Next, I want to give thanks for the upcoming speakers for each of the 6 Carlstrom families, and Susan Gardner of Houston, Texas, speaking about Ansel Carlstrom's siblings. Imagine that Sue and her husband Richard and 2 grandsons drove up from Houston, and the grandsons are out fishing now. I want to thank my son Alan Beck for being the master of ceremonies. Now, which one is that? That's not one of mine, huh? The speaker at our Sunday morning worship service, my son Dan Beck. Oh, there's Dan. Finally, our Carlstrom family descendants from the West Coast for hosting part 1 of the 2019 reunion on June 1st in, I can't even pronounce it, Hoquiam, Washington, something like that. Brenda Carlstrom and Bonnie Gable. They're in the Peter Carlstrom line. They're the daughters of Holly and Evelyn Carlstrom. And they arranged their own reunion and had several descendants there of Peter and Bessie Carlstrom. See, when you don't stick with your notes, you get lost. I just got lost. Bonnie Cable, one of the sisters, thought about having the 2 reunions. So we got one on the West Coast. There's about 20 some odd there, and here's 150 or so. So about 175 people. That's pretty good. And they came up with the idea of Hands Across America. Thus, the banner with traced hands and names of those attending the West Coast reunion. The banner is on the table under the 6 family portraits back there. So take a look at it. I got that a couple days ago in the mail. They wanted me to mention it to you folks. So thanks to them. So I'm done with my intro, but I'll be back. Thank you.
All right, and don't worry about the babies crying. It's a great sound, isn't it? The family line continues. So now we have Anshelm Carlstrom's sister, Johannah's great-great-granddaughter, Susan Gardner from Houston, Texas. So she's going to speak more from the perspective of, for those of us here, be my great-grandfather's siblings. So that's the perspective she's going to be speaking from. And the hardest part's going to be is being brief. We got a lot of people to talk. So just a reminder, about 10 minutes each. And so pay close attention, if you would, and listen to Susan Gardner. Where is Susan? There she is. Come on up, Susan.
Okay. Well, I am going to start out by sharing with you how we're all related. The original family started out in Vemdalen, Jämtland, Sweden. And that was Anders Carlstrom and Christina Blom. They had 7 children, the first being Eric Olaf. He was born in 1860, but he died when he was 1864. He died in Vemdalen. The second child was Adriana. She was born and died in Vemdalen. She lived from 1847 to 1890. The third child was Nils Gustav. He was born in 1857 and died in 1918. He immigrated to Aiken, Minnesota. So we have a lot of descendants from Minnesota. The fourth child was Anders Carlstrom from 1855 to 1935. He was born and died in Vemdalen, and I'm proud to say that in 2009, I contacted a genealogist to help me find living descendants still in Sweden. And he found the great-grandchildren still living, and one of them was Marianne Carlstrom Jakobsen, and I got to meet her in 2010. And at the time, they were still living in Jämtland in a little town called Svenstavik. And they met us up in Jämtland because they had recently moved to the southern province in Småland. And I felt very privileged to be shown the different towns that our ancestors had lived in, starting out with Vemdalen, Klovsjö, Osarna, and Skoland. It was very interesting. And I'm still friends with Mary Ann and her husband and family. They have been over to Houston, Texas to visit with us, and we've been over to see them on several occasions. Then we have the fifth child, born to Anders and Christina, was Ansel. He was settled in Stockholm, Maine, and many of you here today are his descendants. The sixth child was Margareta. She was born in 1853, and she died in 1941, and she immigrated to Red Deer, Alberta, Canada. Then the seventh and the youngest child was my great-grandmother, Johannah. She immigrated to Lancaster, Minnesota, and I am probably the fourth generation. Johannah and her husband Lars had 11 children, and one of them being Caroline, which was my grandmother. Caroline had 10 children, one being my mother, Pearl, and then Pearl is my mother, so the fourth generation. When Johannah immigrated with her husband, they came in through Quebec in 1891. And I'm sure the reason they came to America was because times were very hard. Most people worked for the large farmers who owned the land, so you didn't own the land, and you generally didn't own the little cottage that you lived in. And so you didn't make the big profits. So I know that my great-grandfather Lars wanted to come to America because there was the Homestead Act in Minnesota at the time. And he homesteaded in Lancaster, Minnesota. And in 1955, when I was 8, I visited there with my mother, and I was able to see the 2-story wooden home that they built. It's now no longer standing, but just the concrete slab is the only thing that's left. My grandmother lived until 1945, and she died in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She was living with one of her daughters, Aunt Victoria. My mother said that she remembers her as being a tall woman, and she didn't want to speak English. She understood it, but she was afraid people would make fun of her because of her Swedish accent. And my great-grandfather, her husband Lars, he was, as most Swedes are, very athletic. And Mother said that he would come to visit his daughter, Caroline, Mother's mother, on the farm, and he would walk. I think it was like 150 miles from Lancaster to Baudette, Minnesota, and he would camp along the way. He would come even in the winter time, and Mother said she would run out on the path to meet him, and in the winter time he would have frost on his eyebrows, on his mustache, and his eyelashes, and be carrying his knapsack with his hands behind his back, walking. And so he was a very tough, muscular, athletic build fellow, from what I could tell from his obituary. He died in 1932 of prostate cancer. They didn't know much about that in those days and treating it. So that is my information, and I hope it makes it a little more clear to you how we're all related in the different generations. I'm going to throw in a few Swedish phrases. Tack för maten, thanks for the meal. And tusen tack, many thanks or 1,000 thanks to Bob Beck and everyone who made this reunion possible.
Thank you, Susan. And now, Bob Leno from Rockdale, Mass., grandson of Peter Carlstrom. So, Bob, if you can come.
Well, first of all, there's no tall people on my side. This is, I was hoping some of my cousins would step forward and do this, thing about my grandparents and stuff. I figured some of the older siblings would come forward, but nobody was raising their hand. And Bob, being such a gracious guy, kept on asking an email, and I said, Bob, I'll do it. So I started putting this together, actually, 2 nights ago. My sister will probably be hitting me in about 2 minutes ago, but I really just put this together by speaking to my Aunt Loretta, the only child left of all the 12 kids that my grandparents had. And Loretta was excellent. She gave me some insight about my grandparents. My grandmother lived with us the last 5 years of her life, and she was just a wonderful woman. And Peter was a legend up in northern Maine. I didn't realize this until my parents retired. They didn't retire from outside of Worcester, Mass. To go to Florida. No, they go to Stockholm, Maine, and where the snow never ends. But people up there, I went to visit multiple times, and I found out that my grandfather was a legend up there, not for being a barber or a mortician. He did all sorts of work, but as a gentleman that ran away from the game wardens most of the time. He was really quick, fleet of foot, and he was a legend up there because he never got caught. And and I found out from my mother years ago, he had a second well, and that's where he was hanging the deer, in the second well, to keep the meat cold. But he was quite the character. I remember him wearing a little bow tie when he dressed up. He loved to fish and hunt, as I said. But I think he liked my grandmother a little more with 12 kids. So they did everything. those days, you had the outhouse, you had the farm, you did your vegetables, you did your gardening, you had your cow, you had your chickens out there, and Betsy, my grandmother, would go out and just grab the chicken, chop its head off, put it in the pluck it, whatever it took to feed those 12 kids. And all those 12 kids did very well for themselves. One by one, starting with my Aunt Nettie. She moved to Worcester area and for work, I'd say in the mid-30s, 1930s. And one by one, aunts and uncles were moving, to either Worcester area. Some moved to as far west as Washington, Florida. They were all over the place, all through the country. But very close-knit family. The 7 girls in the family, and they were so close. My Aunt Josephine, Joanne, they're just wonderful people. And you could see that my grandparents did such a wonderful job bringing these kids up. My grandmother, I knew her better because she lived with us the last 5 years. There's a little library right down the street from me. I mean, it is small. But the librarian said she's read every book. I don't know what else to give her. And she read all the books in that little library. She would read a book in like 2 days. It was amazing. Always picking the Bible up and reading different verses and things within the Bible. Very easy to please. A little cup of tea, salada tea with the little sayings in the back. She loved just a cup of tea. You give her a cup of tea and you were like golden for the day. And she had a good book. But Peter, when I went up to Maine and hearing all the stories about all the things that he did, he was quite the character. He was quite the man. And I can't say enough how well those two did bringing those children up. All my aunts and uncles, we were always getting together on my mom's side. They always seemed to be very close, and there's quite a few of us were right around the Worcester area. So the gatherings back then were amazing. My father owned a restaurant, bar room, and he would get clams, and we would get like 2 bushels of clams. And of course, the Chilton family, they're the normal-sized people in our family. They would go through those clams pretty good, especially Uncle Joe. Joe was a pretty big boy, But getting back to the children, Nettie being the first one to move to Worcester, she died of pneumonia at an early age of 29. We had an unfortunate death also with Uncle Billy, who was died right after I was born in 1953 on New Year's Eve. He was hit by a drunk driver actually walking back to the base. And he's buried right in Worcester. My aunts asked years ago who was going to take over planting flowers at the gravestones. And my wife and I have been doing it the last 5 years. And, my Aunt Nettie, my grandparents, my cousin Byron, and Uncle Billy. Uncle Billy was like a Marine and a corporal in the Marines, and died very young. And handsome guy, normal size. He was normal size too. So I think I took it after my grandfather's side, actually the French side. That's what it was. So, but that's about it. If anybody else wants to speak on the Chilton side, there's 430 of them. They're more than glad to have you come up. But I thank Bob Beck. I really want to see, I'd like to pass a hat around or something for this gentleman that did so much. Not just Bob, his children, Alan, and everybody else that did so much. This is amazing to have the cups, all the work that was done. You can just see the love and hard work that was done here. So, Bob Beck, I thank you for getting this started, and this is a wonderful, wonderful occasion. Thank you.
All right, Dad, you're up again. Where'd he go? There he is. He tends to wander and walk and talk to people. I think it's probably where I got it from. I'll raise it up a little bit. So Bob, is my dad normal size or are you normal size? I didn't quite get that. What was? So I'm raising the mic. I mean, is this normal height for the mic, or was it? Find where it was. So after my dad is done, then we're going to hear from Marilyn McCormick, and then we'll take a break, have some ice cream. So just kind of give you that information. We'll come back and be 4 others that will share.
Bob Leno, thank you for that. But I'm going to pass. This is something I've wanted to do, and like I said before, I'm very emotional. And the fact that you're all here is awesome and appreciated. So I practiced this little thing on my mother, Christine Carlstrom, at home with my kids, and I got about 2 lines and I lost it. So I'm going to try, and if I don't get through, he's going to come up and take over. Okay? Fair enough? So, here we go. I'm going to read it. My mother, Christine Carlstrom, was 2 years old when she came to America in 1888 with her 4-year-old brother, Peter, which we just heard about from Bob Leno, and her dad and mom, Ansel and Ingeborg. They came to New Sweden, Maine, from Jutland, Sweden. It is my understanding they landed at Ellis Island in New York. My dad, Carl Oscar Beck, came to Maine from Unmad, Sweden in 1905 at age 18, also via Ellis Island. My dad could not speak English and had an 8th grade education in Sweden. He learned the trade of making fine furniture, and that was how he made a living after he married my mom and settled in a cold water flat in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Here they had their first child, Melvin. Melvin's daughter, Margaret, is here today. As an aside, my parents loved to dance. In particular, the waltz or the Swedish polka. How many use Swedish polka? While living in Cambridge, my mom at age 22 contracted the flu and as a result was totally deaf for the balance of her life. Melvin's voice was the only voice of her children that she ever heard. Although Mom could not hear my voice, we had our own method of communicating. I would stomp on the floor, I'd go like this, or this was meant $10. So they lived in Cambridge for a couple of years before moving to a 100-acre farm in Mercer, Maine. There they raised 4 more children, of which I was the last and the only one still living. My siblings, Melvin, Waldo, Linwood, and Selma. Imagine those names, and then they come up with Arthur. They died at ages 85, 95, 85, and 87. I am 88. The Bible says in Psalm 90, verse 10, "As for the days of our life, they contain 70 years, or if due to strength, 80 years. Yet their pride is but labor and sorrow. For soon it is gone and we fly away." So we're here 70, 80, maybe 90 years, but that's it. My parents and siblings, except for my sister Selma, lived most of their life in Maine, moving from Mercer to Norridge to Waterville. My sister Selma McAvoy and family lived mostly in Virginia. My mom always worked in the home as a housewife. She was an excellent cook. Her dumplings were delicious and perfect in consistency. How many of you Swedish women can make good dumplings? I mean, it's an art. Nobody in my family can make dumplings because she didn't have a recipe for one thing. Okay. Her homemade bread was to die for. I remember I would go into the house. When she just took bread out of the oven, I would cut a piece, smother it in butter. Yum, yum. Was that ever good? My mom kept an immaculate home, and people say I married my mom. Although Judy never met my mom, she sure cleans and cooks like her mother-in-law. Mother loved riding in the car or truck with my dad. Remember, she couldn't hear. My dad, who I always called Pa, would keep my mom waiting long periods of time in the car before they would leave, because Pa always had last-minute things to do or people to talk to. These times of waiting by Mom are very clear in my memory. My family and I were blessed to attend the Carlstrom Family Reunions in 1987 in Millinocket and 1990 in New Sweden. And I am grateful to Andrew and Salma's families for making these reunions possible. During those reunions, I had about 16 first cousins. Now I have 11. One from Peter Carlstrom, which is Loretta Twitchell, now 84. Loretta, where are you? Loretta, stand up so we can see you. This is Loretta Twitchell. She corrected me. She said 85. Did you hear that? 4 from Selma. There's Eleanor Sodergran, 91, Tina Chase, 84, Linda Callison, 79, and Elma Gunnison, 81. Elma, you here? There's Elma. Welcome. A little late, but he's here. Five from Andrew Carlstrom. Everett. I am 12 days older than Everett. They call him Anshelm. There's Anshelm. Mary McLaughlin. Can I say 84, Mary? Francis, 83. And Robert, 81. And then there's one from Herman Carlstrom, Catherine Menduca. Catherine, where are you? I just met Catherine about a month ago. Lived right up in Winslow, Maine. Practically next door neighbors. Didn't know about it. This is why we got this reunion, so we get to know each other. 6 am I living? 11. First cousins are here today, which you've already recognized. That's pretty great. 7 of us. In fact, we're going to have to get a group portrait of the 7 of us. Right, Mark? Yes. Or Tara. I never, Tori. Sorry. I know. What's wrong with me? I have many fond memories of the many trips with my parents to Stockholm to visit my cousins and grandfather Ansel and grandmother Ingeborg. I was 6 when grandfather died and 12 when my grandmother died. And I had the pleasure of attending both funerals. About 10 years ago, my brother Linwood and I took a 4-day trip to New Sweden and stayed with Tina Chase at her camp on Madawaska Lake. Tina was going to be here today, but she just wasn't up to it at the last minute. We visited our cousins and attended the Midsummer Festival, which I strongly recommend that you, if you've never gone to it, it's in July, take it in, you'll love it. About 4 years ago, I struck off alone for a revisit with my cousins in New Sweden and had a tour of Elmer's antique car collection. You ever seen his car collection? This is impressive. He's got to be in the category Rockefeller to have those cars. Okay, where am I? On the way home, I spent a couple days with my many cousins in Millinocket, and Ansel was my tour guide and had everything prearranged. It was awesome. It has been 29 years since the last Carlstrom reunion. I hope that in the future, someone in this gathering will organize another reunion so that we can maintain face-to-face contact with each other. At 88, it won't be me. You have received a bound 50-page booklet with photos and family trees of Peter, Christine, Selma, Andrew, Adina, and Herman's families. Please take one per family. Share with your other families as a memory of this reunion. I am grateful to my grandfather Anshelm and grandmother Ingeborg Carlstrom for moving from Sweden to Maine to raise their family, and I'm looking forward to knowing each of you more over the years to come. Let's keep in touch. Thank you. I got through it.
You got through it. He did. He got through it. Thank you, Dad. Okay. We're going to hear from Marilyn, and then we're going to break for some dessert. So Marilyn McCormick from Lisbon, Maine. She's a granddaughter of Adina Carlstrom. Now, where is Marilyn? Here she comes. Okay.
Hi. I'm not very good at public speaking, so I brought my backup people here. This is my sister Nancy and my sister Donna. But first of all, I would like to say taksamika to Bob for inviting me on his excellent adventure. You're a legend. You'll be talked about for years. And now I'm going to pass it on to these girls, and then I'll fill in anything at the end.
We figured since we'll be talking about 3 of them, that we would divide it up. I'll be talking about Adina, Nancy will be talking about William McCormick, and Marilyn Henryman. So Adina, we have to thank her for her personality.
Excuse me, get a little closer to the mic.
Oh, you can't hear me. So Adina is the type of person, she was the best role model that anyone could have. She raised 3 of us kids, and her favorite thing was cooking and baking. You couldn't wake up in that house that you didn't think you were in a bakery. There was a hot 3-course meal every night, and on Sundays, forget it. And she would tell all 3 of us children who were little at the time, don't worry about finishing your dinner, just make sure you have room for dessert. There was cookies. She was like an unbelievable cook. I'm trying to think of all the funny things that she just did. She was a housekeeper, and she used to clean this woman's house who was probably 20 years younger than her, and she would sit there and go, "Oh, I have to go to the old lady's house today and clean," calling her the old lady and not herself. She was just a remarkable, strong woman to take on us 3 kids, clean the house, do all the cooking, and all I can say is she was the strongest woman and the best role model I could ever have.
I'm Nancy Sibley. I'm Bill McCormick's daughter, so Adina's granddaughter. And so my dad, Bill, would be so happy to see everyone here today. I'm sure he's looking down upon us and smiling. So Bill was, like his mother, hardworking, but he was also very fun-loving and would tell a joke to any stranger that he met. So I wanted to talk about hard work. My brother Billy actually told me some of these stories. Billy can't be here today because I was the youngest. I didn't remember a lot. So Billy said we had a camp up in Shapley, Maine, or down in Shapley, Maine on a lake, and my brother Billy would work with my dad a lot. So one of my dad's favorite phrases was, "It builds character." And my brother Billy would get so tired of hearing that. One story he told me was they were building a basement on a camp down the road from us, and it was a family friend who had 9 boys. So it was my brother and my dad, and my brother assumed some of the 9 boys would be helping, but no, can do. It was my brother and my dad working, sweating, and all of a sudden he looks out on the lake and he sees the 9 boys going by in the boat water skiing, waving to him, spraying him as they go by, and my dad just looked at him and said, "It builds character, Billy." So anyway, fun-loving, he loved everyone and everyone loved him. I feel like he probably knew some of you. I know later on in his life he took a ride up and visited a lot of you that I spoke with. Loved family, and he actually was, I didn't know the whole situation, but when Adina worked, he was boarded at different homes. So he lived on farms and worked on farms and loved the farms. But he was a head of maintenance at Framingham Union Hospital and would go to bat for anybody and everyone and befriended everybody there. The last story that my brother told me that I wanted to share that kind of sums up how he is, he used to take everyone in. I do remember people staying at my house growing up because he would just take anyone in. And one weekend when he took the 3 kids, well, let me just step back. He was a single parent with 3 children, Billy, Donna, and Marilyn. And Adina and Henry took him in, and he always said how kind they were to take him in. And then he eventually met my mother and married. She had her 3 children, and then they had me together. But the story is, before I was born, they went up to the camp, and it was like fall or winter, and he goes up to the camp, and there's a broken window. And so he makes an excuse and tells the kids to go back in the car, and he goes in the house, and there was a couple who had broken in there, and they had lit a fire. And after talking to them and appraising the situation, he realized that these people were down on their luck and just needed shelter and food. So he brought the kids back, and he introduced these people as Aunt Betty and Uncle Tom from Maine so that the kids wouldn't be afraid. And Billy said he saw my dad wink as he introduced them, and he knew everything would be okay. And so if you knew my dad, he could spin a story like that. He was amazing. So that's it. I just want to thank everyone and thank Bob especially. Anything?
And now comes Uncle Henry, one of the biggest unsung heroes. The poor man never had any kids in his life, and all of a sudden he's got 3 kids living with him, and he couldn't be kinder. If Graham didn't fill us enough on Swedish pastry, he took us for super duper ice creams. And he just was so wonderful with he was just so talented. He could do anything. He had this workshop that he could make anything out of. And he taught me how to plant gardens and taught how to talk to the seeds and the flow of the seasons from one to another. He was just the most wonderful, gentle man. And I just remember him back from when I knew him, but then it turns out he had quite another life, because before the war, he was evidently an outstanding gold kicker for a football team. He was going to be drafted. Then the war happened, so they didn't have any football games, so unfortunately, that took a turn. They never get to appreciate that. But he was just the most wonderful man, and we just had such a wonderful life in Belmont. And I'm sure if you all knew my grandmother, you wouldn't forget her laugh. You could be anywhere, and Adina would start laughing, and then you'd have to stop what you're doing and laugh. So I could say Taxamika, but I can't speak any more Swedish because my grandmother would not teach me, because she said that was for the old people to talk so that you people wouldn't understand what we were saying. So I'm sorry I can't say anything but Taxamika again.
I knew that word in Bushigu, that was it. And only 2 words. Thank you, this has been very, very informative. So, we'll take a break, have some dessert. I believe there's ice cream and there's cookies, and take a few minutes, and we'll come back and hear from 3 more. And we have some gifts to give away for couple that's been married the longest and things of that nature. So please help yourself to some dessert, and we'll pick up here in a few minutes.